everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. So it looks like we've got a fascinating topic on our hands today, all thanks to you, the listeners.
Yeah.
A lot of you have been sending in questions about the future of space exploration and, specifically about who is really leading the charge.
Mhm.
Is it private companies like SpaceX, or is it still the government agencies like NASA?
It's a really interesting question, especially because we keep seeing all those headlines,
Yeah.
about SpaceX, leading the way and ushering in this new era of private space travel.
Exactly. And it got us thinking, is that really the whole picture, or is it maybe a bit more complicated than that?
Right.
Luckily, we've got an incredible source to help us unpack all of this, the brilliant Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, he always cuts right to the chase, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And he's never afraid to challenge those assumptions.
Definitely.
So let's dive in.
All right. So one of the articles you sent in was all about SpaceX successfully delivering cargo to the International Space Station.
Oh, right. And that sparked a ton of media buzz with people claiming that this was proof that private companies are now the future of space exploration.
Exactly. But you know what's funny? NASA has been doing this for decades.
I know. It's like everyone was suddenly amazed that a bakery, bakes bread.
Exactly. So why all of a sudden hype around SpaceX doing it? Well, Tyson has some thoughts on this.
I bet he does.
He points out that throughout history, all of those really huge, game-changing projects, the super expensive ones, were spearheaded by governments, not by private companies.
That's a good point.
Like, think about it, the Great Wall of China, those incredible cathedrals in Europe, even the Apollo program, landing humans on the moon.
Yeah, those were massive national efforts.
Exactly. And there's a reason for that.
Okay, so what's the reason then?
Well, Tyson argues that these groundbreaking projects, they often provide something he calls public goods, things that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to make a quick profit from them.
Ah, I see. So it's stuff like national security, scientific advancement, stuff that moves society forward, but might not directly fill someone's pockets.
Right. Like landing on the moon was a huge achievement for humanity.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exactly a money-making venture.
Okay, that makes sense. So governments are kind of playing the long game here, focused on, national pride, global standing, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Exactly. And that's where the motivations of private companies come in.
Right. They have to answer to their investors. They need to see a return on their investment, which makes those huge, super expensive long-term projects a bit tricky.
Exactly.
But, we can't ignore the incredible things SpaceX has accomplished, especially their reusable rockets. I mean, landing a rocket back on Earth intact rather than just having it be a one-time use. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, absolutely. That is a massive engineering accomplishment. Imagine if we had to build a whole new airplane for every single flight.
Oh, my gosh.
The cost would be insane. SpaceX's reusable rockets are seriously changing the game, making space travel way more affordable.
Okay, so it's definitely a big deal in terms of, efficiency and making space travel more accessible. But is it really pushing the frontier of space exploration in the same way that, say, the first moon landing did? Or is it more about making what we already do in space more efficient and cost-effective?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it takes us straight to that ultimate space frontier.
Mars.
Mars. The red planet. Every sci-fi fan's dream.
It's the next big target, right?
Totally.
Everyone wants to know when and how we'll get humans there. And Tyson uses a really interesting thought experiment to highlight just how hard it would be for a private company to pull off a Mars mission.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's hear it.
So imagine Elon Musk, with all his ambition, walks into a room full of investors and says, I'm going to Mars.
Bold move. Right. But then he lays out the facts, the cost, trillions of dollars, the risk, enormous, including the very real possibility of losing lives, and the immediate financial return, basically non-existent.
Yeah, that's a tough sell even for Elon Musk. So does that mean a Mars mission is just a pipe dream for now?
Not necessarily. Based on everything we know about these massive game-changing projects, the most likely scenario is that a Mars mission will happen. But it'll probably be led by a government.
So like NASA spearheading the mission.
Exactly. Driven by those national and scientific goals we talked about earlier. And they might very well contract SpaceX to provide the technology, like they already do with those cargo deliveries to the ISS.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of SpaceX and Mars, they recently announced an uncrewed mission to the Red Planet, which, feels like a huge step toward eventually getting humans there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a classic strategy in space exploration. sending a robotic scout first.
Makes sense.
Map the terrain, figure out potential problems, before risking human lives. It's a much more calculated approach. And NASA's doing the same thing with their Artemis program. Their plan to return humans to the moon.
Oh, yeah. Artemis, they're taking that measured approach too. Uncrewed missions first, then the crewed landings.
It just highlights how both SpaceX, with their own ambitions, and NASA, with their scientific and national goals, are using this incremental approach.
So it's less about who's leading the way and more about how these different players with their own unique strengths and motivations are actually working together to push the boundaries of space exploration.
Exactly. And that collaboration extends beyond just the United States. Think about the International Space Station.
Yeah.
That's a testament to global cooperation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Multiple countries pooling resources and expertise to build and operate this incredible orbiting lab.
It really makes you wonder, what else could we achieve if we harness that collaborative spirit on an even grander scale?
Now there's a thought-provoking question. The future of space exploration is full of possibilities. And understanding this complex dance between private companies and government agencies is key to navigating this exciting new frontier.
So let's rewind a bit and come back to your initial question about the roles of SpaceX and NASA in this so-called space race 2.0. We've talked about the historical patterns, the different motivations at play, and this really cool interplay between private innovation and those bigger national ambitions. But what are the key things that set these two entities apart?
Well, at their core, their goals and how they approach those goals are really different.
Okay.
NASA, as a government agency, is all about scientific discovery.
Yeah.
National prestige, pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the universe.
Right.
But SpaceX, on the other hand, is a private company, and they're all about developing technologies that are commercially viable. Their big dream, making space travel more accessible and eventually colonizing Mars.
So it's like they both want to explore space, but their reasons why and how they go about it are totally different.
Exactly. And their approaches to doing things are also going to be different.
Okay, I see. So NASA, with that government funding, can take on projects that are riskier, maybe more scientifically ambitious, like pure science goals.
Right. Whereas SpaceX has to be more mindful of the bottom line. They need to make sure that their innovations are also financially sustainable, that there's a return on investment for their investors.
But like we've said, they're not really in competition with each other. In fact, they often work together.
Oh, definitely. I mean, SpaceX has been contracted by NASA to transport cargo and astronauts to the International Space Station, and they're also collaborating on that Artemis program.
Right, which really shows how their strengths can complement each other.
Exactly. So it's less about rivalry and more about partnership. Both of them want to advance space exploration, but they come at it from different angles with different strengths.
So this Space Race 2.0, it's not just a simple competition. It's a much more complex story about ambition, innovation, and, most importantly, collaboration.
Absolutely. And this story, it's still being written. The next few decades are going to be incredibly exciting as both private companies and those government agencies keep pushing the limits of what's possible in space.
And as that evolution continues, I think some pretty interesting questions are going to come up. You mentioned earlier the potential need for new international agreements and regulations. What did you mean by that?
Well, as more private companies join the space party, we're going to need to think about some bigger questions,
Yeah.
like who owns the resources that we might extract from asteroids or the moon? Who gets to set up settlements on other planets? How do we make sure we don't damage these pristine environments in space?
Yeah. It's kind of like needing some rules of the road as space gets more and more crowded.
Exactly. We've already seen how things can go wrong here on Earth when profit comes before, well, everything else. So we really need to learn from those mistakes and, come up with some guidelines to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes in space.
So basically, we need some kind of Magna Carta for space, some ground rules to ensure that everyone has fair access, that development is responsible, and that this incredible frontier is preserved for future generations.
I love that analogy. A Magna Carta for space, a framework that outlines the rights and responsibilities of all nations and, anyone operating in space. It's a really powerful idea.
And this is a conversation that needs to happen now. We need to bring together experts from all fields, scientists, lawyers, ethicists, policymakers, to come up with the shared vision for the future of space exploration.
Absolutely. The decisions we make today will have a huge impact on generations to come. So we need to make sure that we leave behind a legacy of responsible stewardship and peaceful cooperation in space.
That's a powerful message. Space exploration, it's not just about rockets and technology. It's about who we are as humans and how we choose to interact with this vast and awe-inspiring frontier.
Beautifully said. And that underscores the importance of constant dialogue and collaboration between everyone involved. Nations, scientists, policymakers, private companies, we all need to work together to shape a future of space exploration that benefits all humankind.
Okay, so we've gone from unpacking this idea of a space race 2.0 to understanding the complex dynamics between private companies and government agencies. We've even touched on some pretty big ethical considerations and the need for a Magna Carta for space.
We've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully you're feeling better equipped to join those conversations about the future of space exploration.
Definitely. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's loop back to something you said earlier about the profound impact space exploration has already had on our lives here on Earth.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in all the exciting talk about Mars missions and such, but we sometimes forget how much space technology already shapes our everyday lives. You're absolutely right. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of all the ways space exploration has already impacted our lives.
Totally. Like we use GPS every day without even thinking about it.
Right, but that wouldn't even exist without those satellites orbiting our planet.
Exactly. And it goes way beyond just GPS. Think about satellite communication, weather forecasting, medical imaging.
So much of our modern world relies on technology that wouldn't be possible without space exploration.
So the next time someone asks, why are we spending money on space when there are so many problems here on Earth? Well, I think it's important to remind them of all those benefits that we get from space exploration.
Absolutely. It's not just about scientific knowledge. It's also about investing in technologies that have real-world applications that can make life better for everyone.
Hmm.
And, this partnership between governments and private companies pushing technological boundaries,
Hmm.
it's actually not a new thing.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
It reminds me of the Transcontinental Railroad in the U.S., that massive project connecting the entire country.
exactly. Such a huge undertaking. It required a ton of money and a ton of labor.
Oh.
But the government stepped in and incentivized private companies to get involved, by offering things like land grants and subsidies. And the result, well, they created this revolutionary infrastructure project that completely changed America.
That's such a good analogy. It shows how governments can create the conditions for innovation, and then private companies can bring their entrepreneurial energy and technical know-how to actually make things happen.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're seeing happening with space exploration today. NASA, with the support of the government, they set those big goals.
Yeah.
Provide the funding, ensure that everything meets safety standards.
Right.
And then private companies like SpaceX, they compete for contracts, bringing their cutting-edge technology and cost-effective solutions to the table.
So everyone wins.
Exactly.
It sounds like the real takeaway here is that it's not about who is leading, but about this really interesting collaboration between public and private sectors, each one using their strengths to move things forward.
You got it. And that collaborative spirit, it's not limited to one country.
Right.
Remember the International Space Station?
Oh, yeah.
It's the perfect example of teamwork on a global scale. Multiple nations sharing resources and knowledge to build and keep that amazing orbiting lab running.
Okay, so it's definitely not an either-or situation. It's this dynamic interplay between all these different players. But let's zoom back in on the listener's original question about the roles of SpaceX and NASA in this Space Race 2.0. Could you break down some of the key differences between them?
Sure. At their core, their motivations and goals are really different,
Okay.
NASA as a government agency is all about scientific discovery, national prestige, pushing the boundaries of our knowledge about the universe.
Right.
But SpaceX is a private company. Their main focus is on making space travel commercially viable. Their ultimate goal, to make it to Mars, to colonize it.
So they both want to explore space, but for totally different reasons, and they go about it in totally different ways.
Exactly. And that means their strategies will also differ. NASA, with that government funding, can take on projects that might be riskier, more scientifically ambitious. Pure science goals.
Makes sense.
But SpaceX has to be more mindful of the financial side of things. They have to make sure their innovations are financially sustainable so their investors are happy.
Right, because at the end of the day, they have to answer to those investors and show a return on their investment.
Exactly. But like we've said, they're not really direct competitors.
Right.
They often collaborate. SpaceX has contracts with NASA for transporting cargo and astronauts to the International Space Station, and they're both involved in that Artemis program.
Right. Which really shows how well they can work together, how their strengths complement each other.
It does. So it's
Yeah.
really not a rivalry. It's more like a partnership.
hmm
They both want to see space exploration advance, but they have different perspectives and approaches.
Okay. So this so-called Space Race 2.0, it's not about competition. It's much more nuanced than that. It's about ambition and innovation and, maybe most importantly, collaboration.
Absolutely. And the story's not over yet. The next few decades will probably bring even more breakthroughs and exciting developments as private companies and government agencies keep pushing those boundaries in space.
And as all that evolves, some pretty interesting questions are going to come up. You mentioned before the potential need for new international agreements and regulations.
Definitely. As more private companies enter the space arena, we need to start thinking about some bigger questions about responsible development, about environmental protection, about who owns resources that we might extract from asteroids or the moon.
Yeah, it's like we need a set of traffic laws for space as it gets more crowded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, we've already seen what can happen here on Earth when people put profit before everything else.
Right.
There can be some unintended consequences.
Right.
We need to learn from those mistakes so we don't repeat them in space. We need some kind of guidelines, some rules to ensure that everyone has equal access and that development is done responsibly. We need to preserve this frontier for generations to come. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like we need a Magna Carta for space.
Mhm.
Some ground rules to
Yeah.
ensure that everyone has a fair shot, that development is responsible, and that we don't destroy this incredible frontier for future generations.
I love that analogy. A Magna Carta for space. A framework that outlines the rights and responsibilities of nations, of companies, of anyone operating in space. That's a really powerful idea. And this is a conversation that needs to happen now. Like right now. We need to get the brightest minds together, scientists, lawyers, ethicists, policymakers, to develop a shared vision for the future of space exploration.
I think you're right. It's time to start thinking about these things seriously.
Definitely. The choices we make today will impact generations to come. So we need to make sure that we're leaving behind a legacy of responsibility, stewardship, and peaceful cooperation in space.
Space exploration, it's not just about rockets and cool technology, is it? It's about who we are as humans and how we decide to interact with this amazing frontier. It's about responsibility.
It is. It's about recognizing that space exploration is a reflection of humanity itself. And it underscores how important it is to have open communication and collaboration between everyone involved. Nations, scientists, policymakers, private companies. We all need to be working together to shape a future where space exploration benefits everyone.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We started with Space Race 2.0. Then we unpacked this complex relationship between private companies and government agencies.
We even talked about ethics and the need for a Magna Carta for space.
We really have. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And it highlights a really important shift in how we think about space exploration. We're moving away from this idea of competition and toward an idea of cooperation. We're starting to realize that the challenges and opportunities in space are too big for any one nation or company to handle on their own.
That's a really big shift, and we can see that shift happening all around us in the growing number of international partnerships and collaborations. Space agencies all over the world are joining forces on projects ranging from planetary exploration to Earth observation and even tackling the problems of space debris.
It's an amazing time to be following space exploration. It feels like we're on the verge of a new era defined by collaboration, innovation, and a shared commitment to pushing those boundaries of human knowledge and understanding. But with all the focus on Mars missions and deep space exploration, it's easy to forget about the impact space exploration already has on our lives right here on Earth.
No, absolutely.
I mean, think about all of those technologies that we take for granted.
Right.
They came from space research, and they benefit us every single day.
It's easy to forget about that.
It is. But space exploration isn't just about looking outward, that it's also about gaining a deeper understanding of our own planet and our place in the cosmos.
That's a great point. It seems like we've come full circle in this conversation. We started with private companies pushing the boundaries of space exploration, and now we're ending with a renewed appreciation for the interconnectedness of it all. From the amazing technologies that improve our lives here on Earth to the absolute necessity of global collaboration in shaping the future of space.
You really captured the essence of this deep dive. It's a story about ambition, innovation, and most importantly, collaboration. It's a testament to that never-ending human thirst for exploration and all the incredible things we can achieve when we choose to work together.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question to consider. We've talked about who's involved in space exploration, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. But at its core, space exploration is about something much bigger, isn't it? I think it really is. It goes beyond budgets and rockets and even Mars. It's about something fundamental to what it means to be human, that drive to explore, to discover, to push beyond what we know.
It is. It's that curiosity,
Right.
that feeling of awe we get when we look up at the stars and wonder what's out there. It's the same drive that led our ancestors to explore new continents and sail across oceans.
And as we venture further into space, I think it's important to hold on to that sense of wonder, that shared human experience that connects us all. It reminds us that we're not just citizens of different countries, we're all crewmates on this spaceship Earth, traveling through the cosmos together.
I love that. Yeah. And as we continue this journey, it's important to make sure we're doing it responsibly, sustainably, so that we preserve this incredible frontier for future generations.
It's like we're writing the next chapter of human history, and we have a chance to make it a story of collaboration and innovation and progress.
Right, a story where we learn from the past, embrace the present, and create a future where space exploration benefits all of humanity.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. We started by breaking down those headlines, then we explored this complex relationship between private companies and government agencies.
We even talked about ethical considerations and that idea of a Magna Carta for space.
We covered so much. I hope our listeners feel like they can better understand and navigate the ever-changing world of space exploration.
I hope so too. But before we sign off, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier. That incredible impact space exploration has already had on our lives right here on Earth.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of future missions to Mars and beyond. But it's important to remember that space technology is already a part of our daily lives in so many ways.
Exactly.
From GPS and satellite communication to medical imaging and weather forecasting, space technology has revolutionized so many aspects of our modern world.
And these advancements aren't just conveniences. They've saved lives, connected people across the globe, transformed entire industries.
So, to anyone who asks why we should invest in space exploration when there are problems here on Earth, well, the answer is pretty clear. It's an investment in our future, in scientific advancement, in creating a better world for everyone.
It really is. It's a reminder that space exploration is about more than just science. It's an investment in humanity itself.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought to ponder. We spent a lot of time talking about who is involved in space exploration, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. But there's an even bigger question lurking beneath the surface. What does it all mean? What does it mean for us as humans to be venturing out into the vastness of space?
That's a really deep question. And I think it's one that each of us has to answer for ourselves.
Mm.
But for me, it comes back to that fundamental human need to explore, to understand where we fit into this massive universe, and to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Maybe it's about recognizing that we're not just inhabitants of this one planet, but citizens of a vast and incredible cosmos, a cosmos full of endless possibilities and mysteries just waiting to be discovered.
I like that. And as we explore this amazing universe, let's do it with a sense of wonder, with a spirit of collaboration, and with a deep respect for the delicate balance that makes our planet so special.
Well said. It's been a pleasure diving into these ideas with you today. Thanks for joining us and sharing your expertise.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep looking up and keep exploring.